You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 30th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program.
Frankly, Canada should be the 51st state. Canada relies entirely on the United States. We don't rely on Canada.
Donald Trump raises the stakes and Canada folds, at least for this trade round. We'll look at Canada agreeing to suspend the digital services tax in order to keep trade talks alive. After that,
the estimate is that with the right reforms, the private sector could cover as much as 1/3 of reconstruction needs.
A look at Ukraine's economy and reconstruction with the International Finance Corporation. We'll also look at protests in Thailand calling for the Prime Minister to resign, and we'll hear from one of the largest real estate developers in the UAE. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Donald Trump's trade negotiating style is pretty clear at this point. Threaten to end talks and expect to get what you want. With Canada, at least for the moment, it does appear to have worked. Prime Minister Mark Carney has agreed to suspend a digital services tax that was due to come into effect this week, after Trump this weekend announced that trade talks with Canada would end. After Carney's U-turn, talks now appear to be back on. Well, I'm joined now from Wimbledon by Paul Waldy, Europe correspondent at the Globe and Mail. Paul, you are at Wimbledon to cover the Canadian tennis players who are there. I've looked a bit through the schedule. There are no US-Canada matches at Wimbledon today. Canada seems to be playing ball with Australia, Germany, even Russia, anyone but the United States. I suppose that's fair enough. What are you watching?
Yeah, it's true. There is one player here who is joint Canadian and American citizenship. So she's taking on the number one seed, Aryna Sabalenka, shortly. So we do have that, one dual citizen, but she does play for Canada.
She is. Is she feeling some divided loyalties right now? Is that what the entire country is feeling?
I don't know. I maybe she is. I'll have to ask her after her match. But I think that, yeah, I mean, certainly going into this, she was talking a big game about how much Canada means to her in terms of her playing and how much support she gets from the Canadian system. So I guess from that standpoint, she's a true thorough Canadian.
Well, this does bring us to the news, doesn't it, Paul? Because Canada really has seen maybe a revival of a certain amount of patriotism through all of these trade spats with Donald Trump. But can you walk us through the last 48 hours or so from Canada's perspective?
Well, I mean, I think it's just bizarre, and I think Canadians will really be wondering just what exactly is going on. We'd heard a lot of this talk from Trump about annexing Canada a few months ago. Then it kind of died down when Carney took over. And then when Carney won the election, there was less and less talk of that. There seemed to be a sense that Mark Carney was getting through to Trump, or at least was on a different wavelength than former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was. And then now, of course, we see this complete about-face by Trump. He wants the talks to end because he suddenly discovered Canada has a digital services tax, which, you know, had been announced months and months ago. It did go into effect on Monday. However, it wasn't necessarily a new tax. And of course, Canadians will be wondering why Canada is being singled out for this when Trump negotiated a tariff agreement with Britain and didn't mention their digital services tax at all. So it's going to be, I think, very confusing for Canadians. But I guess it's just the way it goes with Donald Trump.
Will any of this fall on Mark Carney, Paul, from your perspective, the fact that he did have to suspend this digital services tax that was going to be coming into effect on Monday? Is there any talk there that Carney should not have backed down?
Probably not yet, but I think Carney is going to start running out of goodwill pretty soon because now, of course, he's given up roughly about $1 billion worth of revenue every year. He's talking an awful lot about increasing defense spending and doing a lot of other things. So he's losing a little bit of money already. And there was, you know, an awful lot of talk that, well, everybody's going to vote for Carney because he'll get us a deal on trade. He'll get these tariffs removed. And that hasn't happened yet. So I think, you know, people will still cut him a bit of slack going forward. But as the summer goes on and these talks go on, they're going to want to see some results pretty soon.
And do you expect that Carney will change his tone to match that as well? I mean, as you laid out at the outset of this, Carney, during the election campaign, certainly took on a very strident anti-Trump tone. But of course, electioneering and governing is different. So he has worked with Trump since then. Can we expect him to kind of go back to playing the bad guy if he wants to?
I don't think he will. I think that was campaign rhetoric. I think since then he's been much more diplomatic towards Trump. He hosted the G7 and kind of kept everybody online and kind of seemed to have kept Trump fairly happy. I think it is a little bit surprising. We don't know yet, but it looks like Canada kind of gave up the digital services tax without getting anything in return. And that's been the big pressure on Carney, and that is get these tariffs removed, not negotiate them lower or bring them down, but get them removed entirely. So I think the pressure, as I say, is going to start to build on him pretty soon for those results to start to happen.
And do you think the digital services tax and other things for that matter are completely off at this point? Because the question is, for a trade negotiation, exactly as you say, you need to hold some of the cards. Donald Trump has boasted basically that he holds all the cards and Canada has none. Do we expect that Carney might play some of his cards down the line?
Doesn't have a lot of cards. Trump is correct on that front. Canada's far more reliant on the U.S. than the U.S. is on Canada. Now, there are areas where the U.S. does depend on Canada a lot, and things like potash and electricity and those kinds of things. But by and large, it is pretty a one-way relationship. The big problem for Carney going forward is he can probably walk away from the digital services tax. It's Canada's protection of its dairy industry. That always raises problems for Canada in trade negotiations. And Trump has singled that out as well. Canada has a very restrictive, protective market for milk, dairy products, cheese, those kinds of things. And Trump has raised this, and Canada has faced this issue before. And it's an incredibly political issue because it's very big for farmers in Quebec and Ontario, the big political base for Carney's Liberals. So that will be the big challenge, how far Trump pushes Carney on that front.
And in the meantime, Paul, I do have to ask you about the citizens, the public as well. How have they reacted to all of this? And are you still seeing a kind of shift here from Canada really deciding that it cannot rely on the United States when it comes to trade, buying goods from pretty much anywhere but the United States?
Well, I think, there was this initial kind of patriotism and, Buy Canada effort when all of this talk first surfaced from Trump a few months ago. That's faded a little bit, but the resentment is still there. The anger is still there, and the anxiety is still there. And yes, you are seeing a lot more Canadian companies. I was just at a tech show in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and you're seeing a lot more Canadian companies saying, we're going to have to broaden our horizons and look to Europe, look to other places to expand and not just count on the U.S. anymore.
Paul, we'll let you get back to Wimbledon, but final word on that. Which Canadian are you most excited to see over there?
I'm pretty excited to see this girl, Carson Branstein, take on Sabalenka. I think it's going to be fascinating for her. She's ranked 197th in the world. It's a big moment for her. She made it through qualifying, first time at Wimbledon. So, hey, let's see how she does. Maybe there's a big upset brewing.
Thanks very much, Paul. Enjoy it. I'm very jealous. That was Paul Waldy, Europe correspondent at the Globe and Mail. And now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Switzerland's government has been affected by a cyber attack on the non-profit health foundation Radix. The attack involved data being stolen, encrypted and published on the dark web. Radix customers include various federal units, but federal authorities are still trying to determine the specific offices affected by the attack. Uganda's long-standing leader Yoweri Museveni has confirmed he will seek re-election in next year's presidential vote. The 80-year-old has been the ruler of Uganda since 1986 when he seized power after leading a 5-year guerrilla war. If elected, he would extend his rule in the East African country to nearly half a century. And the current heatwave sweeping Western Europe is threatening to hamper shipping and raise freight costs for cargo owners. The high temperatures have lowered water levels of Germany's Rhine rivers, meaning cargo vessels can only sail about 50% full due to shallow waters. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. If Ukraine is going to rebuild its nation and keep the economy afloat in the coming years, it's going to take the work of both international governments and the private sector. One group that operates somewhat in between the two is the International Finance Corporation. It's an offshoot of the World Bank that helps support private companies willing to invest in developing nations. Earlier I spoke with Ines Rocha, the IFC's regional director for Europe. She began by describing the economic challenges that Ukraine faces more than 3 years into this war.
We are now just over 3 years of war, a war that has unfortunately continues to devastate its people and the economy. And it's quite striking how the Ukrainian people continue to be so resilient. I was actually in Kiev twice over the last month, so I experienced firsthand the more recent intensified attacks, but also had many private sector and government meetings where there is a strong commitment to continue to keep the economy going, continue on the reconstruction, continue on supporting the economy and Ukraine's people. And reconstruction needs are massive. In fact, the World Bank did also a study called RDNA. This is the 4th edition. There is an assessment of the reconstruction's needs and damages as a consequence of the war. And the staggering number comes to just over 520 billion of reconstruction needs over the next decade, where the private sector will in fact play a critical role in meeting these needs. Now, IFC has stood by Ukraine since the first day of the invasion, and we remain committed. And we have, since the start of the war, invested over $2.2 billion. This is own account, but also mobilized investments across a number of sectors, from financial sector to agribusiness to energy infrastructure to funds, and industry overall. So very critical sectors, including also trade finance, and we continue to remain committed. So what we have seen in fact is, notwithstanding the challenging conditions, and the conditions are not getting easier, if I can also say, out of first-hand experiences. I myself had to be under a recent raid alert and missile attack in Kiev itself. But the economy remains resilient. We have a strong pipeline of projects across a number of key sectors. So just over 2.7 billion for the next 18 months to 2 years. And really unlocking private sector will assist on meeting these reconstruction needs. And in fact, the estimate is that with the right reforms, the private sector could cover as much as 1/3 of reconstruction needs.
Ines, when you describe being in Ukraine there, being in Kyiv, what you experienced yourself, I have been there as well earlier on in the war, and there is quite a cognitive dissonance, is that maybe the best word to describe it, I think, between those who are outside Ukraine and those who are within, because life continues there, the private sector continues there. And I wonder if you could describe that from your perspective. When you speak to private companies who have just been working in Ukraine, they're working on reconstruction even while a war is going on. How do you see that difference between kind of what private companies are doing in Ukraine and how this is perceived by companies outside of Ukraine in Europe?
Like you see, you're right. There is the risk perception is different when you are operating in Ukraine. You have experience of operating in Ukraine, and institutional party investors that have not operated and in fact are only taking the news feeds that clearly state others that there are constant attacks, there is a war, it's a country at war. But the reality on the ground is that, as you say, the businesses continue to operate. There are, in fact, we've participated together with EBRD on the largest FDI investment in Ukraine since the start of the war in the telecom sector, which is a sector that has proven to be quite resilient because communication is key, even in a war situation, right? So you have businesses that are operating on a commercially sustainable manner because life continues. And this, to the great merit of the Ukrainian population, which has shown a great deal of resilience. So when you are there on the ground, you understand that there are business opportunities, there are investment opportunities, notwithstanding the challenging conditions, and the economy goes on. It is also within our role as MDBs to share some of these insights with investors that are currently looking into opportunities into Ukraine. We have a presence on the ground, so we have permanent staff in Kiev, and I think this also allows us to get first-hand information on what is happening in Ukraine. We have excellent relationships with the government and constant dialogue. We are very involved as a group, World Bank Group, on a number of reforms, and Ukraine's accession path to the EU, and the government of Ukraine has made really impressive steps and progress on reforms on a number of areas that are well defined as well in this EU architecture. And I think that the fact, that we're there, we're on the ground, we can partner with local players, but also attract institutional, international players, joined up with local players. So this is, for example, what we did for this flagship transaction in the telecom sector to reduce the asymmetry of information, which is a reference also to the problem you mentioned. So we are there, we have access to information, we understand the local dynamic, where the opportunities are, and we can make that connection. Now, of course, there are still challenges, in particular, connected to some of the constraints, connected, to the war limitations in terms of how much you can, some of the considerations on travel, you have to take quite a number of precautions. But this is a country that has been coping now for 3 years, over 3 years. So, and life does go on. Life does go on.
That was Ines Rocha, Regional Director for Europe at the International Finance Corporation, or IFC. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak. Thailand is no stranger to demonstrations, but this weekend saw thousands of protesters take to Bangkok's streets for one of the largest demonstrations in years, demanding that Thailand's Prime Minister resign. Paetongtarn Shinawatra is facing her biggest crisis yet after a leaked phone call with Cambodia's leader over a border dispute. The daughter of the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra has lost key coalition support, now faces a no-confidence vote next month that, if successful, would bring down her government and end, potentially, the Shinawatra family's political era in Thailand. Well, I'm joined now by Titinan Pongsudhirak, Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Chulalongkorn University. Titinan, thanks very much for coming on the show. Let's start with the background on this, if we could. Why did a phone call between two leaders cause such a big problem for the Prime Minister?
It became an explosive issue because of the Thai-Cambodian relations and border dispute. So basically, since February and then in May, Thailand and Cambodia have been having a war of words. And on May 28th, there was a gunfight between two sides. This is about a border issue, a border conflict that goes back 1,000 years, go back 200 years, when Siam conquered Cambodia, Khmer, and then when the French colonized the region, Cambodia and Thailand. So anyway, this is a long-running spat between the two sides. There have been a border conflict before in the 1960s. 1990s, and the last time 2011, 2014. This time similar, but a different area. And basically, Cambodia has taken the issue to the International Court of Justice. Along the way, the Shinawatra family and the Hun Sen family, they know each other well. So, Pat Tong Tan, the prime minister, thought she can clear this up with a phone call. But in the phone call, she compromised her position as Thailand's prime minister and damaged Thailand's integrity and sovereignty by pledging to make arrangements. Whatever Hun Sen wants, she can make it up. She can make it for him, or she can arrange it for him. In return, she asked him to return the status quo to the pre-May 28 gunfight, and to calm down the border dispute. Along the way in the conversation, she also antagonized and chastised the Second Army Region Commander in Thailand. So that became a spark. A lot of Thais are not unhappy with the call. They thought that she really damaged the country's reputation, integrity, sovereignty, and this became a crisis for her. So now it's just not a border dispute, but a political crisis that has raised, mobilized protests against her and making her looking very vulnerable and maybe untenable.
And how big were these protests over the weekend? As I mentioned, Thailand has faced protests before. Do you sense that these are of a different character, both the size of the protests, but also it's a quite simple demand: she must resign?
It's a very sad story for Thailand that, we've had these kind of street protests for 20 years now, going back to 2005, 2006. I mean, there were protests in the 1970s as well, 1991, 1992. But in the current period, the contemporary period, is really the last 25 years, 20 years when Thaksin Shinawatra came to power in 2001. So you have a very similar pattern. The whole, the big picture here is about the forces of modernity. Thailand is trying to modernize itself, but the traditional institutions that run the country, the military, the judiciary, the monarchy, bureaucracy, they're trying to restore their privileges. They're trying to maintain their vested interests. And therefore, Thailand has had, 2 military coups in 2006, 2014, a bunch of judicial interventions and street protests. And the pattern with the protests in the streets is that when the Thaksin family, the Thaksin side is in power, they faced street protests eventually, and they eventually got ousted, deposed by 2 military coups, Thaksin himself and his sister Yingluck in May 2014, Thaksin in September 2006, and now his daughter Pat Tong Tan. Now, there were other also interventions by judiciary, against protests by the red shirts. But the red shirts, the anti-establishment protests, they don't get anywhere. They get suppressed. Young people also protested in 2020, 5 years ago. They also got suppressed. So if you are pro-establishment protesting, you tend to win, and that has been the pattern.
That is the pattern as it's been so far. And as you say, this pattern is starting to repeat itself with these protests. Is there an expectation at this point that the military might also get involved once again, just like in the past?
Yes and no. The military, ideally, the establishment forces would not want to see military intervention. Remember that Thailand's economy is languishing. The Thai economy is expanding maybe 1%, 2%. We might see, a recession. We're seeing signs of stagnation, economic stagnation and political decay in Thailand. People are unhappy. There's no future for young people. That's why some of them are leaving. 5 years ago, they protested. So the military, if they take power again, seize power, they will have a hard time trying to find an interim caretaker government. And the last time this happened in 2014, it was disastrous. The coup leader, General Prayut, led the government for 9 years and ran Thailand to the ground, accumulated public debt. There was no good news coming out of that time. So I think the military would be, and its backers would be reluctant to use a military solution. In its place, they've been able to use the judiciary, right? Judicial interventions, judicial manipulation, subversion by the Election Commission, Anti-Corruption Commission. So these are the agencies that have been doing the bidding for the establishment. So, when push comes to shove, it will be the very last resort to go to the military option. I think that they will do all the other subversion and manipulation short of military takeover if they can do it.
Well, and Titinan, short of perhaps manipulation and the military being involved, is there a chance that this actually gets resolved politically? Because there is also going to be, I understand, a no confidence vote in the Prime Minister. She has lost support from a coalition partner as well. Is it possible that this could be resolved in the way that democracies resolve these things? She faces a no confidence vote, she loses, she resigns, there are elections.
The only peaceful, regular, acceptable by international standards of a resolution would be for the Prime Minister to resign and allow the House to reconvene and choose a new Prime Minister. That would be one way, sticking with the current National Assembly. Or she could call a snap election and return the mandate to the people. I think the protesters, a lot of these protesters, remember, they're from the 2006 and 2014 coup periods. These are right-wing kind of establishment forces. But I think most people are calling, would like to see some kind of a new mandate, a new election, new poll. But the problem is we could return to 2 years ago because the opposition Progressive People's Party, they would do well. They won the election last time 2 years ago, but they were dissolved. So, when we would have a dilemma, if we go to election, Progressive People's Party could win again, even by a bigger margin. But yes, the resolution at this stage would be for the Prime Minister, embattled and untenable as she looks, to call for a new poll, new election, otherwise step aside to allow a new Prime Minister to be voted in the lower house. I think most people would like to see a new election.
Titinan Poksudirak of Chulalongkorn University, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Earlier this month, the UAE played host to a prestigious group of global policymakers, planners and city leaders shaping the cities of tomorrow. They were all gathering for the inaugural edition of the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit, unpacking everything from building inclusive neighbourhoods to climate-resilient design, mobility solutions and even destination development. Monocle's editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck, was in attendance to find out about how Abu Dhabi is turning big ideas into reality. And one of the people he spoke to was Sarah Satari, who is the senior global communications lead at Reportage, one of the largest private developers in the United Arab Emirates. Andrew began by asking Sarah why it was important for a group like Reportage to present at Addis.
Reportage Group is honoured to be here. This is Addis's first edition and exhibition in Abu Dhabi, and it's a benchmark, a global benchmark for infrastructure. We are participating in building the future, which is the main purpose of Addis's exhibition, and we are trying to align with Abu Dhabi's and UAE's vision in 2030, which is having 0% of carbon footprint in the city. So this also equals and aligns with having a better quality in living in the UAE. So this is, first of all, our reason for participating here in Addis. And one of our main pillars as well is sustainability and social sustainability. So this also helps us push our purpose further into the community and help better the quality of people living here.
Now, Reportage is building a large number of homes here in Abu Dhabi. Tell us a little bit about the scale of that business.
Absolutely. So we have more than 60 projects. 7 of them are in the Masdar city, which is a benchmark here in Abu Dhabi for building sustainability projects for the environment. We have more than 17 branches as well globally and more than 30,000 units. Just today we have closed $1.5 billion in selling out units. So that's a great, I would say, goal for us, a milestone. It just shows how much we've been reaching out to the community and how much we've been trying to support bettering the quality of the people's livelihood here in Abu Dhabi.
How difficult is it to build at that pace and still hit all of these environmental and sustainability targets? Because everybody's finding that a challenge around the world, the need for speed and also doing well for the world. How are you managing to balance those two things? Because that's a strict criteria that's been set for 2030.
That's true. So first of all, Reportage is not new in the market. We've been here for 14 years and just recently we started to bloom. So we have been through challenges. We've had a lot of obstacles in our way, But thankfully here in UAE, they make it easier for you to achieve such goals. UAE is helping us out and helping other developers as well in the country to achieve certain milestones, such as Masdar City as well. I'm going to go back to that. They already help us build a certain protocol of having a social sustainability livelihood. They provide us with the solar panel energy systems and energy efficiency systems as well, water consumption, and etc. So thankfully UAE does ease out the entire movement for us, and this is why we are capable of growing in such a rapid movement, I would say.
So there's a strong partnership with the leadership here as they ensure that everybody is aiming for the same targets for this 2030 plan. So I presume there's a lot of discussion between you and central government about how you achieve those targets.
So we're not partnered up with the government. We're a private entity.
But I mean, there's a conversation about how you deliver these
absolutely,
things.
Because we want to align with the government's vision towards the country, and it matters to us to help the people out that live within us and around us to achieve such vision in the country as well. So the government does help us out, even though we're not partnered up with them at all.
And tell me the other interesting thing, which is that there's a lot of emphasis here over these 2 days on livability, on lovability, on green space, on walking, on cycling. We talk a lot about the built environment when we think about infrastructure, but interestingly, Abu Dhabi's putting a lot of focus on these softer elements, the bits in between the buildings almost.
Yeah. So because Abu Dhabi, as we all know, it's a very hot environment here. It's a desert basically, and we want to better the quality of people living around us, and this comes with the way you live and your lifestyle, and this goes to the smallest things in our life, like walking around, having organic food, etc. And we're trying to build that for people here so they can feel comfortable and more at home. Specifically that in UAE there's a lot of expats that come from Europe and the West, and obviously the agriculture and the infrastructure there is quite different, and we're trying to create a new home for people that come from outside and are ready to call UAE their new home moving forward. And this also is apart from our purpose and vision in the UAE's.
And then just tell me, what are you building? What do people want? Because again, when we think of some of your neighbours in the region, you think only of high-rise. I've been fascinated to see that many of the projects coming to fruition here in Abu Dhabi are pretty low-rise. They're walkable neighbourhoods.
Absolutely.
There's a shift to being down on the ground in some cases.
Yes. So a lot of our projects are actually townhouses, and it's a smaller version of a villa, and where you are provided with a lot of walking areas, biking tracks, community pools, club houses. We're trying to build a tight-knit community or a tight-knit circle for the people. Having such infrastructure provided for people will help provide people with such network, such social life, and this is what exactly we want to do. So yes, I would say more than 50% of our projects are actually not high-rise, but instead townhouses and low-rise buildings.
That was Sarah Satari from Reportage Properties in conversation with Monocle's Andrew Tuck at the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit. To hear more from the event, you can listen to the latest edition of The Urbanist at monocle.com. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Laura Kramer and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.